this earthquake.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Would like to join with the Minister of Finance and the Minister who's just spoken in acknowledging the Christchurch Memorial Service, the loss of life from the earthquake, and of course the presence of the Australian Prime Minister, Opposition Leader and Governor-General, which was deeply appreciated. Mr. Speaker, that is where our agreement with the Minister of Finance stops, because the Minister of Finance's next statement was that National's going to stay the course. Well, the obvious question is, which course are they going to stay? Is it last week's course when they were putting the whole cost of the earthquake on Bill's bill, putting it on the plastic, carrying it all as debt? That was too much for the Greens. They came out and said National was fiscally irresponsible, and the IMF agreed. And that was too much for John Key. He had to go on nationwide TV, overrule his minister and say, no, you're not, Bill. I'm slashing your budget to zero. And as Russell Norman's pointed out today, that is a real terms cut that's going to hurt New Zealanders deeply. And then Mr. English trotted out the same old furphy about rebalancing, he says. National's recession is because of National's mismanagement. Not because of rebalancing, because here's the bad news proved by the Reserve Bank last week. Rebalancing hasn't actually started yet. Households and businesses in New Zealand owe more debt today than they did last year, more debt today than they did when National took office. And they won't actually start turning a corner until 2013. So it isn't rebalancing, at least not yet. The economy's going backwards because the government has no plan. It's changing, it's lurching all over the road, as we've seen in the last couple of weeks. You know, at a time, Mr. Speaker, when commodity prices are at all-time highs and our biggest trading partners, Australia and Japan, are doing well, we should be moving forward, and we are not, because the National has mismanaged the economy. There's no growth, jobs are being lost, families are under pressure, prices are rising, and people are finding it harder and harder to make ends meet. We are going backwards, Mr. Speaker, and it's time that this government took responsibility. Economic commentators, sir, have pointed out the obvious from the 13th of March, quote, if bombed-out economies like the US and the UK can show strong signs of investment-led recovery, why can't we? This new recession is the government's, and it must own up to it. And, sir, we agree. There is no plan. The tax switch didn't work. Giving $43 million a week in tax cuts for the top 10% of taxpayers was lunacy. It took it out of circulation, it meant people lost jobs, and it added to debt at a time when New Zealanders could least afford it. The Minister of Finance said he inherited a reasonably strong position, and he did, because Labour left the books in credit to the tune of 4.7% of GDP, as he said, for a rainy day. The rainy day came, but unfortunately he milked it for tax cuts for people who didn't need it. And that is why, sir, they are having to cut the budget in 2011 to zero, which is a real terms cut. Mr. Speaker, just a month ago, here's another lurch. They said the biggest problem facing the country was savings, that this would be a budget about savings. Now, that was pretty ironic then, because they had already cut $1 billion out of KiwiSaver incentives, and they had cut, wait for it, $42 billion cumulatively out of the New Zealand superannuation fund. $42 billion they've taken out of the super fund, according to the Treasury's documents put to the FEC by the Retirement Commissioner, taking it down to only 57% of its previous level of funding. That's incredible. They beggared New Zealand superannuation. Then they said, this budget's going to be about savings. We're going to implement the Savings Working Group report. Well, guess what? The tax sweeteners in the Savings Working Group report all cost around $1 billion each, like indexation. How are they going to afford that under John Key's zero budget? Where's that billion coming from? Well, it might be coming from KiwiSaver. KiwiSaver's been the single most successful savings plan in New Zealand history, and this government's going to wreck it. It's going to wreck it even more than they have, because they do not know their economic backside. died from their economic elbow. Mr. Speaker, a week ago,